recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the gentlelady from North Carolina for yielding me the customary time, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, to all my friends on the other side who have held this floor hostage for weeks on end, let me save them the suspense. Nothing changes with this rule. There is nothing in this rule that forces the Senate to take up the awful Save America Act. Nothing. The majority is simply attaching the Save America Act onto an unrelated State Department funding bill and sending it across the Capitol. The Senate can and will strip it right back out. Everybody here knows that. The fact of the matter is that the SAVE Act is never going to become law because even Republicans know it is a disaster that will make it more difficult, if not impossible, for American citizens to vote. It will make it difficult, if not impossible, for American citizens to vote. So what Republicans are doing here with this procedural move is not some master strategy. It is merely political theater designed to settle another Republican family feud. And if that's enough to flip members who have held up business for weeks, boy, they are cheap dates. What this rule does is bring to the floor 4 bills. The first would make daylight savings time permanent. Look, everybody has an opinion about changing the clocks. I actually support this bill. But for folks getting crushed by rent, groceries, utility bills, and health care costs, is this really the best the majority can do? Is this really the most pressing issue before the American people at this moment? Then there are 3 bills Republicans tried to bring up weeks ago before their own chaos brought the House to a standstill. One is a State Department funding bill that cuts funding for American diplomacy and foreign assistance. Another would block the use of a merchant code for gun stores, making it harder to flag suspicious purchasing patterns. And then there is the so-called Take Care of Americans Veterans Act. That title is doing a lot of work, my friends. That bill expands some benefits by putting the disability compensation of future veterans on the chopping block, particularly veterans suffering from tinnitus and sleep apnea. In other words, get this, Republicans want disabled veterans to pick up the tab for other veterans' benefits. That's just plain wrong. How hard is it to understand that we shouldn't rob Private Peter to pay Sergeant Paul? And the Veterans of Foreign Wars agrees. They were in the Rules Committee last night. The VFW strongly opposes this bill on behalf of the veterans it represents, and it published a political cartoon to protest the cuts. And what did the Republican chairman of the Veterans Committee do? He and other Republican members sent a letter to the Department of Veterans Affairs asking the agency to review the VFW's accreditation. That accreditation is what allows the VFW to represent veterans before the VA and help them navigate the benefit system. So, disagree with the cartoon? Fine, say so. But do not use the federal government to threaten the VFW's ability to help hundreds of thousands of vets. That sure as hell looks like retaliation to me. Veterans fought for the right to speak their minds. They should not be threatened by their own government for exercising it. But this is what happens when a majority becomes completely consumed by its own dysfunction. Meanwhile, Americans are working hard. They are doing everything they've been told that they're supposed to do, and yet somehow they can't get ahead. And what is this Republican majority doing about any of it? Next to nothing. Next to nothing. And, and one of the bipartisan things that we actually did do to try to bring down housing costs, Donald Trump refused to sign it. He let it become law without his signature because he was angry that the Senate had not passed his voter suppression bill. I mean, imagine that. Think about how screwed up all of that is. Families cannot afford to buy a home, rents keep climbing, and the President of the United States used a bipartisan housing bill as leverage in his fight over election lies. That tells us everything we need to know about this party's priorities. They will move heaven and earth to protect Donald Trump's political power. But when it comes to making life more affordable for regular people, suddenly they can't find the time, can't be bothered. Republicans control the House, they control the Senate, they control the White House, they control the Supreme Court, and they still can barely keep the House floor open long enough to do the people's work. Mr. Speaker, the American people deserve a hell of a lot better than this chaos. And with that, I reserve my time.
The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am very happy to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Herodopoulos.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm proud to stand beside you today in support of this good rule and talk about the future of America. And I first have to say this, and one of the things that makes America great is that anything is possible. And I am very optimistic that we'll be able to pass legislation to make us all proud. Just last week, we celebrated the 250th anniversary of America and the idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And in my mind, when you talk about the pursuit of happiness, in my mind means improve by care. And that's exactly what we are looking to do when we change for the better our VA system. As the son of a veteran and a father of a person now in the military, we make very simple pledges that if you choose to serve your country, we will provide for you after your service. This bill will make sure that surely, that not only will you get the pension you deserve, but the benefits if injured in service. It is common sense, and it's unfortunately has taken this long to get it all together. But the good news is that help is on the way. And we respect those who serve, those soldiers who put their life on the line every single day for us and allowed us to live in freedom for over 250 years. Because for too many veterans, getting health care benefits means dealing with long lines, confusing paperwork, or unnecessary government red tape. This bill will fix that. It makes it easier for veterans to see a doctor when they need one, whether it's at a VA hospital or a trusted provider back at home. It speeds up disability payments, expands the access to mental health care, and also improves care for veterans with serious injuries. And it also helps families who have sacrificed alongside them. It provides more support for caregivers, protects benefits for surviving spouses, and gives service members better tools to transition from military life to civilian careers. Just last week, I met with so many veterans back in my district. And they know that there's some things that maybe we can improve, as always. But what I think politics is the art of the possible. And without doubt, this bill will move forward, keeping the promise that you will get not just your pension, but your benefits you've earned should you be injured in service. And with that, Madam Chair, I want to thank you for putting this forward. This is so important that we move this type of bill forward because we are celebrating the 250th anniversary, the pursuit of happiness, because of the sacrifice our veterans have made. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. I reserve.
The gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, let me just respond to the gentleman by saying that whatever good is in this veterans bill is offset by the bad. I mean, basically, they're saying we're providing veterans benefits by cutting other veterans benefits. I mean, this is a shell game. And that's why the VFW is furious, why they're pissed over this bill, why they've told their membership to contact members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, to oppose it. If this were a tax cut for billionaires, my Republican friends don't care about an offset. If it's an illegal war in Iran, they don't care about offsets. But when it comes to providing veterans benefits, all of a sudden, you know, we got to find offsets. And those offsets that they have found to pay for this are by cutting other veterans' benefits. That is unconscionable. That is wrong. That is wrong. And everybody should vote no on that bill. Mr. Speaker, I now would like to yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, Ms. Dean.
The gentlewoman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Ranking Member McGovern, and I could not agree with you more. I rise in strong opposition to this rule for many reasons, as expressed the outrage about what is in here regarding veterans and their deserved, earned benefits. But for my remarks within it, I'll speak to the Sunshine Protection Act. I worry that this bill is repeating the mistakes of the past and that it is being rushed to the floor without a robust committee process. We tried permanent daylight savings time during the 1970s oil crisis, and it lasted less than a year. The policy was popular until parents realized their children had to travel to school in darkness, armed with flashlights. After 8 Florida children were killed in traffic accidents, the governor called on Congress to end the 2-year experiment early. Over 50 years later, we're making the same mistake again? Please, let's not. And we're doing it with less information. The only hearing on time zones this Congress focused on tourism and golf courses. Members should have been able to speak and ask doctors how permanent daylight savings time would affect our health, safety, and well-being. My home state is Pennsylvania. We did just this in April. In a hearing, Dr. Indira, Director of Sleep Medicine Fellowship at UPenn, explained that our body clocks rely on bright light when we wake up in the morning and dim light in the evening before we go to bed. Under this bill, Pennsylvanians would wake up in the darkness for months. In some parts of the state, over 100 sunrises would be up after 8 a.m. Disruption in our natural sleep-wake cycle can reduce reaction time, alertness, and other measures of performance and safety. And sleep deprivation leads to a higher risk of serious health conditions like obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, depression, and some forms of cancer. This topic deserves robust debate, not a closed rule. Congresswoman Scanlon proposed an amendment for permanent standard time to do just that, but it was promptly rejected. In closing, for the health and safety of our constituents, I urge my colleagues to vote no on the rule. I yield back.
I reserve.
The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I reserve.
The gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to ask that we defeat the previous question. And if we defeat the previous question, I will offer an amendment to allow the House to take an up or down vote on an amendment to H.R. 8595, sponsored by Representative Schreier, which would reverse the cuts to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that were imposed by the Trump administration that could have prevented the ongoing outbreak of cyclospora, a parasite that has already infected thousands of Americans. Last year, the Trump administration began illegally defunding federal health and science agencies, firing scientists and researchers, and cutting programs that keep us healthy and safe. One of the programs that Trump cut was called FoodNet, and it helped federal and state public officials monitor and prevent outbreaks for 8 different foodborne illnesses, including cyclospora. But after Trump and his Doge goons got their hands on this life-saving program, the government stopped monitoring cyclospora. Well, that was stupid. It was dumb, because our country is now experiencing a full-blown outbreak of, you guessed it, cyclospora. For the sake of everyone's health, I urge my colleagues to defeat the previous question so we can reverse these dangerous cuts. And Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of my amendment into the record, along with any extraneous material immediately prior to the vote on the previous question.
Without objection.
And to discuss our proposal, I yield 2.5 minutes to the gentlewoman from Washington, Ms. Schreier.
The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Ranking Member McGovern, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. Right now, our country is facing a public health crisis that has been created by the Trump administration. From misinformation about vaccines and life-saving medicines to devastating cuts to critical research, along with political litmus tests, this administration is putting Americans in danger. Specifically, the cuts to the CDC have been disastrous. Our public health workforce has been attacked, and our ability to assess and respond to outbreaks has been decimated. We're now seeing the worst measles outbreak in decades, and the number of Americans affected by Cyclospora is rapidly growing in over 30 states. And because of inadequate surveillance, that may just be the tip of the iceberg. Last year, the Trump administration changed the CDC's Food Net surveillance program, narrowing the number of pathogens under active surveillance, including Cyclospora. The health and lives of thousands of Americans are on the line as they contract diseases that the CDC has helped us prevent for years and has screened for years, all because of the actions of this administration. If you are an American right now with measles, this CDC has failed you. As Cyclospora spreads, the CDC is not meeting expectations. Communication's been sparse, misinformation's rampant, and real information is lacking. And HHS Secretary Kennedy, as a leader, has been completely absent in helping with any of it. As a doctor and a member of Congress, I am outraged and deeply concerned. We need the CDC to be restored to its previous capacity, because you don't really know how critical our public health service is and our CDC is until there's an outbreak and we can't manage it. And every death from preventable illnesses should be laid at the Trump administration's feet until these changes are undone. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina will now be recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, the American people need to take note of the amount of rhetorical smog emanating from the other side of the chamber, because it's obscene. Our Democrat colleagues continue to weave together an entirely disingenuous and deceptive narrative that Democrats are the ones standing at the forefront of the conversation when it comes to supporting our nation's veterans. That has never been the case and will never be the case. If Democrats truly cared enough about veterans, they'd spend their time supporting Chairman Boss' bill and not coming up with hack job so-called solutions that do nothing to reform the VA and deliver high-quality care and service to those who have served this nation. And it's sad, Mr. Speaker, that our colleagues across the aisle have chosen this position. It's sad that they can gin up misleading narratives and hawk them around like someone delivering newspapers on a bike. The bill before us ensures that combat disabled service members who were medically retired through no fault of their own receive the benefits they earned while maintaining equity across retiree populations. This is what happens when personalities of the day and political gamesmanship subvert actual legislating, like what Chairman Bost and Republicans have been doing the entire time. The former doesn't deliver for veterans. It treats them like second-class citizens. Their solution is spending more money while delivering fewer outcomes. What? Color us shocked. It's a story as old as time. Instead, the bill before us today would reduce net direct spending by approximately $1.3 billion over the next 10 years. In an era of growing deficits and debt, H.R. 9237 demonstrates that Congress can advance significant veterans' priorities while remaining fiscally responsible and reducing overall federal spending. Republicans are focused on targeted relief that focuses on combat disabled veterans, includes additional fairness safeguards, and does not throw money at a problem with the meager hope of things fixing themselves by osmosis. And let's run through what else you will not find in the cobbled together so-called solutions that Democrats are throwing their weight behind. You won't find a unified Democrat effort to reform VA's outdated construction and leasing processes that delay the opening of clinics and facilities across the country. In Chairman Boss' bill, Republicans are doing just that. You won't find the Democrat commitment to ensure that veterans can continue to access the mental health care support services in the communities where they live nationwide. In Chairman Boss' bill, it's there. You won't find Democrat solutions to slash government bureaucracy that hinder veterans from accessing the care they deserve and earned. In Chairman Boss' bill, they are there. That's the difference here, Mr. Speaker. All Democrats see is another government program to funnel money into without any commitment whatsoever to improving the lives of those the program serves. They'll contort the language they use and the policy gimmicks they cook up to mislead people and organizations into believing mistruths. VSOs, the purpose-driven organizations who are dedicated to advocating for veterans, have been led to believe that Republicans want somehow to rob veterans of their benefits. But that's entirely untrue. As is evidenced by President Trump's efforts, the efforts of Secretary Collins at the VA, and the veteran-driven legislation here in Congress, Republicans see the veterans and meet them where they are. Republicans see and understand the problems that veterans face every day and want to ensure that the VA is nimble, responsive, and right-sized so that veterans are not left in the dark and defend for themselves. And here's a final little nugget that I'll leave you with, Mr. Speaker. The majority of our Republican members on the Veterans Affairs Committees are indeed veterans. There's only one Democrat on that committee who is a veteran. I trust veterans to know and understand what veterans need and deserve. People are actually attuned to issues veterans face as opposed to those who simply haven't the slightest clue. Republicans are the ones with actual solutions here. We're not bloviating like so many have chosen to do. We are fighting for veterans, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. I reserve.
The gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
So, Mr. Speaker, if there are people watching these proceedings and they're listening to my Republican friends, they may conclude that they sound a little defensive, because they are, and they should be, especially on these veterans issues. The bottom line is that the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, strongly opposes the disability benefit cuts that are included in the proposed Take Care of America's Veterans Act. And I ask unanimous consent to insert in the record the entire statement of the VFW and their strong, strong, strong opposition to these cuts.
Without objection.
And you know what? I trust the VFW more than I trust the Republicans Millionaires Club that basically populate the United States Congress on their side in this chamber. And the VFW is saying we can do these benefits without punishing other veterans. And I find it amusing because the gentlelady says we need to find offsets. Well, she voted basically to increase the debt by $4.7 trillion in the big ugly bill, adding $4.7 trillion to the debt. Included in that, by the way, is $70 billion, again, unpaid for, for ICE and CBP. I mean, and again, they have no problem with doing that. No problem with tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires, and now America's trillionaire. No problem with tax cuts for them that are not paid for. But when it comes to providing veterans benefits, all of a sudden they have a problem. And by the way, just for the record, there is a discharge petition that has been filed to basically bring the Richard Starr Act to the floor without cutting other benefits for veterans. There is every Democrat is on that. Every Democrat. So we could bring this to the floor. We can have this debate. We can vote on providing veterans additional benefits without cutting other veterans' benefits. I mean, that's the choice. So when we hear these speeches about, oh, we really are doing all that we can and we're on the side of veterans, again, the VFW opposes this strongly. They showed up in the Rules Committee, filled up the Rules Committee hearing room yesterday to show their protest, their outrage over what Republicans are doing. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. You can provide veterans the benefits that they need without robbing other benefits that veterans need. It is that simple. So this is outrageous. This is outrageous what's going on, and people should not be fooled. Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, a distinguished member of the Rules Committee, Ms. Scanlon.
The gentlewoman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you. As I think we can all tell from the ensuing debate here, there are serious issues that this body needs to be wrestling with. But the Speaker has chosen to put on the floor this week H.R. 139, a bill that would make daylight savings time permanent. So I think there's one thing everyone in this chamber can agree on. Americans do not like changing their clocks twice a year. So the big question isn't whether we should ditch the switch, it's how. And unfortunately, the bill that the Speaker has chosen chooses the wrong solution by making daylight savings time permanent nationwide, while denying states the right to enact permanent standard time if they so choose, not if, but when they discover that Congress made the wrong choice. We can all understand the appeal of an extra hour of sunlight in the summer. But permanent daylight savings time comes with serious health and safety concerns caused by even darker winter mornings. If this bill becomes law, winter mornings across the country are going to look very different. Millions of Americans will wake up during the winter months in complete darkness, with the sun not rising until long after people get up and travel to school or work or have to go about their days. In much of upstate and northern New York, communities won't see the sun rise until well after 8:30 a.m. In Michigan, it'll be close to 9 before the sun comes up, and in parts of the Pacific Northwest, sunrise will be pushed even later than 9 a.m. In many parts of the country, children will be waiting for school buses in darkness. Parents will be driving to work before sunrise. Morning commuters, students, and pedestrians will be starting their day in the dark, not because of the seasons, but because Congress decided to move the clock instead of following the sun. We don't have to speculate about what would happen under permanent daylight savings time. We already tried it. During the 1974 energy crisis, Congress made daylight savings time permanent in a failed attempt to save energy. It lasted less than a year. Families found themselves sending their kids to school in the dark, and there were a rash of fatal crashes involving school children. Communities raised serious safety concerns, and public support, which initially was quite strong, quickly collapsed. Congress repealed the policy within months. The science has only become clearer since then. Medical and scientific experts have endorsed the move to permanent standard time because permanent daylight savings time disrupts our natural circadian rhythms, the internal clocks that regulate when we sleep and wake. That disruption has been linked to higher rates of heart disease, stroke, chronic sleep deprivation, and other adverse health concerns. And these bad outcomes are even more serious and long-lasting than the sleep deprivation, traffic accidents, and heart attacks that follow the twice-yearly changes that we currently have. I've also heard directly from my constituents. Like most Americans, they're ready to ditch the switch. But when I asked which permanent system they would prefer if they had to choose, the clear preference was for standard time. And a Gallup poll last year found that Americans preferred permanent standard time to permanent daylight savings time 2-to-1. That's why I've introduced the Bipartisan Sunshine for Our Kids Act with Representative Pat Harrigan. Our bill would end the clock changes, make standard time permanent.
I yield an additional 30 seconds.
Thank you. Would make standard time the national default, but importantly, it would also allow for states to adopt permanent daylight savings time through state law if they choose. If we're going to make a permanent change that affects every American, we should follow the science, learn from history, and prioritize Americans' health, particularly that of our children. That's why I urge a no vote on the rule and on H.R. 139. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I inquire as to how much time is left on both sides?
The gentlewoman from North Carolina has 16 and a half minutes left. The gentleman from Massachusetts has 10 and a half minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have great affection and respect for VFW members. In fact, I have great respect and admiration for every organization that represents veterans. It's because of veterans that we speak English here today and that we are the greatest country in the world. I would like to set the record straight about which veterans organizations are supporting this legislation. We have the American Legion, and I'm not going to read the entire quote, but there's a quote here from Daniel Wiley, American Legion National Commander, who said, "For over a century, the American Legion has been the leading veterans service organization advocating for passage of nearly all major expansions or reforms to health care and benefits that benefit veterans and their families. After thorough consideration of the legislation and regulatory environment, which included conversations with legislators who both agree and disagree with the bill, we believe TCAVA is the best plan forward to get these crucial bills enacted into law." The Take Care of America's Veterans Act is, I'm quoting, "represents our nation's sacred promise to those who serve and those who leave behind," said Bonnie Carroll, president and founder of the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, or TAPS. The Military Officers Association has supported this legislation. The Wounded Warrior Project and 16 other groups support the legislation before us today. Steve Schwab, CEO of the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, is quoted here. "This legislation is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to stand with the veterans, caregivers, and survivors who have sacrificed so much for our country." Mr. Speaker, I have page after page after page of quote from these various organizations that support this legislation. So I believe they are correct in supporting the veterans legislation, which is a part of this rule. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm glad the gentlelady decided to go down this pathway, because it's not only the veterans of foreign wars that oppose this, but the disabled American veterans, the Iraq and Afghan Vets of America, the Hispanic Veterans Leadership Alliance, the Black Veterans Project, Reserve Organization of America, Veterans Education Success, Student Veterans of America, Marine Corps League, Marine Corps Reserve Association, Minority Veterans of America, Common Defense, Vet Voice Foundation, National Security Leaders for America, Swords to Plowshares, the Chamberlain Network, Unite for Veterans Coalition, Veterans for Common Sense, Veterans for Responsible Leadership. I go on and on and on. But the gentlelady began by mentioning the American Legion. She may not know this, but during, as we speak, the American Legion in Texas, representing one of the largest memberships of the American Legion, has come out against this bill and is urging the National American Legion to now follow its lead and come out against this bill. The bottom line is, the more veterans organizations know that they're getting screwed, the more and more they're coming out against this bill. They're in favor of the Major Richard Starr bill, which would provide and expand veterans' benefits without taking away other veterans' benefits. It is that simple. This is a bad bill, and quite frankly, the more people realize what's in this bill, the more they realize the cuts in this bill that will adversely affect the veterans community, the more and more people are coming out against this. Mr. Speaker, I now want to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Landsman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in opposition to H.R. 1181, which is in this rules package. I want to talk about the bill because it is going to make it harder for us to fight gun violence in America. The majority is bringing to the floor a bill that would prevent credit card companies from coding the sale of firearms, meaning that if you buy a firearm from a gun manufacturer, from a gun seller, this Congress is saying we don't want to track that. We don't want it coded. We code everything, but we're not going to code this. It makes it even harder for us to fight gun violence in America. Some headlines from home. 18-year-old dies after shooting near Westwood store. Cincinnati Police Department investigating after shooting in Avondale. One shot in East Price Hill, search underway for suspect. No arrests made after 3 weekend shootings in greater Cincinnati. These are all headlines from this weekend.
I yield the gentleman an additional 2 minutes.
The question then becomes, why are they siding with gun manufacturers and not law enforcement? Why are they siding with the gun sellers and not our kids? It's a terrible bill based on a flawed ideology that somehow, if you sell a gun, you are more important than the people who get shot by one. I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. Young lady from North Carolina gets recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we don't side with killers. We side with the Constitution. With that, I reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Can I ask the gentlelady how many more speakers does she have?
We are prepared to close if the gentleman from Massachusetts is prepared.
How much time do I have left, Mr. Speaker?
5 minutes remaining for the gentleman from Massachusetts.
I yield myself to remaining time.
Recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this debate has made one thing very clear. Republicans are not the victims of this chaos. They are the perpetrators of this chaos. There is only one party that controls this floor and all 3 branches of government. Republicans set the agenda. Republicans write these awful rules. Republicans control the schedule. And Republicans have chosen to spend week after week fighting with one another while regular working people are getting squeezed. Newsflash to my Republican colleagues. The American people know the difference between working and pretending to work. They know that passing the same voter suppression bill again and again will not lower their rent. They know that stapling the SAVE Act onto yet another piece of legislation will not bring down the price of groceries. They know that threatening the VFW will not improve veterans' care. They know that changing or not changing the clocks will not change what is in their bank account. Mr. Speaker, if Democrats were in the majority, we would begin every day with one simple question: how do we make life more affordable for working people in this country? We would work to build more housing. We would work to lower rents and stop giant Wall Street firms from bidding families out of the market. We would take on corporate consolidation and price gouging that are driving up the cost of food. We would lower health insurance premiums and prescription drug prices instead of ripping coverage away to pay for more billionaire tax breaks. We would make child care more affordable. We would lower utility bills and end these stupid tariff taxes that show up in the price of nearly everything that people buy. And we would stay here and we would keep working until the job was done. Now, I'm not saying that every problem would be solved overnight, but we would put real solutions on this floor. We would allow debate. I mean, we don't debate anything anymore. Most of the bills that come to this floor are completely closed, where nobody can offer an amendment. Take it or leave it. I mean, and when something did not pass, we would keep trying. We'd keep trying till we got it right, until we help people in this country. I mean, that's our job. That's what we're supposed to do. And when it comes to veterans, Democrats would fund the benefits that these veterans earned. We would not pit one generation of disabled veterans against another. And that's what my Republican colleagues are doing. And it's really not only frustrating, it's unconscionable. That should not be a partisan statement, by the way, in terms of helping our veterans. That is basic decency. And the American people deserve a Congress that is focused on affordability, not on Donald Trump's long list of petty grievances and attempts to rehash old conspiracy theories from 6 years ago. They deserve a majority that understands that power is not about controlling the floor. It is about using the floor to help people, to improve the quality of life for the people that we represent. Republicans have had their chance. You blew it. You've wasted it. So I urge my colleagues, vote no on the previous question. Vote no on this rule. Let us end the chaos and get back to work for the American people. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.